Story number 27 of the Fairy Ring. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Lars Rolander. The Fairy Ring, edited by Kate Douglas Wiggin and Nora Archibald Smith. Story number 27. The White Cat. There was once a king who had 3 sons, all handsome, brave, and noble of heart. Nevertheless, some wicked courtiers made their father believe they were eager to wear his crown, which, though he was old, he had no mind to resign. He therefore invented a plan to get them out of the kingdom and prevent their carrying out any undutiful projects. Sending for them to a private audience, he conversed with them kindly and said: "You must be sensible, my dear children, that my great age prevents me from attending as closely as I have hitherto done to state affairs. I fear this may be injurious to my subjects. I therefore desire to place my crown on the head of one of you. But it is no more than just that, in return for such a present, you should procure me some amusement in my retirement, before I leave the capital for ever. I cannot help thinking that a little dog, handsome, faithful, engaging, would be the very thing to make me happy; so that, without bestowing a preference on either of you, I declare that he who brings me the most perfect little dog shall be my successor." The princes were much surprised at the fancy of their father to have a little dog. Yet they accepted the proposition with pleasure. And accordingly, after taking leave of the king, who presented them with abundance of money and jewels, and appointed that day 12 months for their return, they set off on their travels. Before separating, however, they took some refreshment together in an old palace about 3 miles out of town, where they mutually agreed to meet in the same place on that day 12 months and go all together with their presents to court. They also agreed to change their names and travel incognito. Each took a different road, but it is intended to relate the adventures of only the youngest, who was the most beautiful, amiable, and accomplished prince in the world. As he traveled from town to town, he bought all the handsome dogs that fell in his way, and as soon as he saw one that was handsomer than those he had, he made a present of the rest, for 20 servants would scarcely have been sufficient to take care of all the dogs he was continually purchasing. At length, wandering he knew not whither, he found himself in a forest. Night suddenly came on, and with it a violent storm of thunder, lightning, and rain. To add to his perplexity, he lost his way. After he had groped about for a long time, he perceived a light, which made him suppose that he was not far from some house. He accordingly pursued his way toward it, and in a short time found himself at the gates of the most magnificent palace he had ever beheld. The entrance door was of gold, covered with sapphires, which shone so that scarcely could the strongest eyesight bear to look at it. This was the light the prince had seen from the forest. The walls were of transparent porcelain, variously colored, and represented the history of all the fairies that had existed from the beginning of the world. The prince, coming back to the golden door, observed a deer's foot fastened to a chain of diamonds. He could not help wondering at the magnificence he beheld, and the security in which the inhabitants seemed to live. For, said he to himself, nothing could be easier than for thieves to steal this chain, and as many of the sapphire stones as would make their fortunes. He pulled the chain, and heard a bell the sound of which was exquisite. In a few moments the door was opened, yet he perceived nothing but 12 hands in the air, each holding a torch. The prince was so astonished that he durst not move a step, when he felt himself gently pushed on by some other hands from behind him. He walked on in great perplexity till he entered a vestibule inlaid with porphyry and lapis stone, where the most melodious voice he had ever heard chanted the following words: "Welcome, prince, no danger fear, mirth and love attend you here. You shall break the magic spell that on a beauteous lady fell. Welcome, prince, no danger fear, mirth and love attend you here." The prince now advanced with confidence, wondering what these words could mean. The hands moved him forward toward a large door of coral, which opened of itself to give him admittance into a splendid apartment built of mother of pearl, paintings and jewels, and so resplendently lighted with thousands of lamps, girandoles, and lustres, that he imagined he must be in an enchanted palace. When he had passed through 60 apartments, all equally splendid, he was stopped by the hands, and a large easy chair advanced of itself toward the fireplace. Then the hands, which he observed were extremely white and delicate, took off his wet clothes, and supplied their place with the finest linen imaginable, adding a comfortable wrapping gown embroidered with gold and pearls. The hands next brought him an elegant dressing table, and combed his hair so very gently that he scarcely felt their touch. They held before him a beautiful basin filled with perfumes for him to wash his face and hands, and afterwards took off the wrapping gown and dressed him in a suit of clothes of still greater splendor. When his toilet was complete, they conducted him to an apartment he had not yet seen, and which also was magnificently furnished. There was a table spread for supper, and everything upon it was of the purest gold, adorned with jewels. The prince observed there were 2 covers set, and was wondering who was to be his companion, when his attention was suddenly caught by a small figure, not a foot high, which just then entered the room and advanced toward him. It had on a long black veil, and was supported by 2 cats, dressed in mourning, and with swords by their sides. They were followed by a numerous retinue of cats, some carrying cages full of rats, and others mouse traps full of mice. The prince was at a loss what to think. The little figure now approached, and throwing aside her veil, he beheld a most beautiful white cat. She seemed young and melancholy, and addressing herself to him, she said: "My prince, you are welcome. Your presence affords me the greatest pleasure." "Madam," replied he, "I would fain thank you for your generosity, nor can I help observing that you must be an extraordinary creature to possess, with your present form, the gift of speech, and the most magnificent palace I have ever seen." "All this is very true," answered the beautiful cat, "but, prince, I am not fond of talking, and least of all do I like compliments. Let us therefore sit down to supper." The trunkless hands then placed the dishes on the table, and the prince and white cat seated themselves at it. The first dish was a pie, made of young pigeons, and the next was a fricassee of the fattest mice. The view of the one made the prince almost afraid to taste the other, till the white cat, who guessed his thoughts, assured him that there were certain dishes at table which had been dressed on purpose for him, in which there was not a morsel of either rat or mouse. Accordingly he ate heartily of such as she recommended. When supper was over, he perceived that the white cat had a portrait set in gold hanging to one of her feet.